Commander Rules Committee made some announcements, and apparently the world is on fire. But first,
my name is Dom Douglas, and I am back-to-back XWW Commentator of the Year. With that comes some responsibilities, but also a lot of fun and excitement, and I'm never ashamed to look like a complete fool. Speaking of that, I love playing Magic the Gathering, so much so that I kind of think I play it a little bit too much, and I have some opinions. So now, XtremeTVOnline.com and XWW Wrestling on YouTube presents my podcast where I talk about Magic the Gathering. It's the Goblin Grenade Podcast.
How's it going, everybody? My name is Dom Douglas, the back-to-back commentator of the year for Extreme World Wrestling that you can catch on XtremeTVOnline.com. $4.99 a month. The first 5 days are free. And we have some, oh boy, do we have some things going on in the world of Commander, and that's what this one's going to be talking about, the bans. That's right. Commander Rules Committee made a ban and announcement list a few days ago. It has taken the internet on fire. Like, literally, there is either you are 1,000% for this or your vitriol is so there on this that you're sending threats to the Commander Rules Committee, and specifically one of them, Olivia, who was actually for you guys. Folks, so congratulations on that. Congratulations on showing that sometimes it's not cool being the voice of reason when it comes to certain things, and if you don't think they're going to remember this when it comes to future bannings, then you're wrong. First things first, let's get to what was banned. Okay, in Commander, Nadu, Winged Wisdom. This was naturally going to be, considering it's banned almost everywhere. But I'm going to read it. Nadu is a green and a blue Simic for a 3/4 flying legendary bird wizard. Creatures you control have, whenever this creature becomes the target of a spell or ability, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a land card, put it onto the battlefield. Otherwise, put it into your hand. This ability only triggers twice each turn. This was banned in Modern. This was printed in Modern Horizons 3, and it was an immediate mistake because the combo potential in Modern and the fact that the turn that it pops off on can take a very long time. We're talking gratuitous amounts of time, and sometimes it whiffs. So there we go. Another one that, Dockside Extortionist for 1 and a red for a 1/2 Goblin Pirate. I'm lucky I traded mine in recently. When Dockside Extortionist enters the battlefield, create X treasure tokens, where X is the number of artifacts and enchantments your opponents control. Dockside does dumb things. I love Dockside, but I knew Dockside was a problem. I got mine in the Commander Precon that it was part of, and I think that was Commander 19 or something like that. One of the Commander decks that when I just got into it and I got it and I put it in my Pirate deck and realized how powerful it was, and didn't play an accurate I didn't play around Dockside. I didn't build a deck around Dockside, but it did some things. Now the heavy hitters. Okay, yes, they're all heavy hitters, but these are the two of the heaviest hitters. Jeweled Lotus, a 0-cost mana, which was printed in Commander Masters. Tap and sack it to add 3 mana of any one color. Spend this mana only to cast your commander. That's pretty big mana ramp on, having a 5-drop commander come down on turn 2. Sometimes even a 6 or a 7-drop on turn 2. If it gets, if you get the magical Christmas land happens. And then the biggest one, Mana Crypt. 0-cost mana artifact. 0-cost artifact. At the beginning of your upkeep, flip a coin. If you lose the flip, Mana Crypt deals 3 damage to you. Tap to add 2 mana. 2 colorless mana. Those were ginormous bans. And Wizards Rule Committee basically said it's all about the fast mana stuff. And I get it. I do. But I don't play CDH, which was the target of these bans. And their explanation is, I feel, justified and adequate. they tempered it, I will admit, knowing that this was going to be huge by saying that, there's going to be the September 28th and 9th. They're hosting the second annual Sheldon Mary charity stream. If you don't know who he was part of the Commander's Rule Committee. He is one of, if I'm not mistaken, the inventors of Commander format, and sadly passed away. And so they're gathering friends and colleagues and whatnot to raise hopefully $50,000 for cancer research, which is what caused Sheldon to pass away. And hopefully they join us. And now that's not like getting in trouble with what I could say, because you have to temper this. They understood the gravity of the situation, okay, of what they were doing. Basically their justification, I'm just going to read it from the announcement. Philosophy of Commander prioritizes creativity. One of the ways we have reflected this is the rules and bans list to encourage a slower pace than traditional formats. Commander's always had the potential for someone to get out to a fast start and be the first arch villain in the game, but that advantage has always been balanced by players gunning. In the past few years, since Strixhaven, we've seen a pattern of stronger mid-game cards that allow players who skip past the early game to snowball through to the win. Mana Crypt, coming down for no mana on turn 1, it's quite possible to have an explosive start with mana, Crypt into Signet or Talisman, land, another Signet, leaving that player untapping 5 mana on turn 2. In games going 12 turns, the accumulated threat damage from Mana Crypt provides a reasonable counterbalance for its explosive effect. Remember, if you lose that coin flip, you lose 3 life, but you can lose 14 coin flips because you start with 40 life. Jeweled Lotus, another card that can give you 5 mana on turn 2. Jeweled Lotus does it without even needing a good hand, which is very true. 4 and 5 mana commanders can pack a significant punch nowadays, often drawing cards to make up for the one-shot mana and defensive abilities. Dockside isn't normally quite as explosive in the early game as the other two, but it can still go mana positive on turn 2 and start generating substantial treasures after that. They've been looking at this card for years, and we've shied away from acting in the past because the card is scaled well, which it does. But we should also talk about the elephant in the room, which is Soul Ring. But before that, what happens with a lot of the bounce effects now, ever since Modern Horizons 2, with Ephemerate and whatnot, you can feasibly get 3 Dockside triggers a turn. And I've seen games where people get 40, 50 treasures off those Docksides. And once that happens, it's kind of game over, because you can't stop the pain train from coming if you have 50 available mana to you on a turn. Soul Ring is the iconic card of the format, and it is. It's the only format basically it's legal in, except for Vintage, and you can only play 1 copy of it in Vintage. Banning Soul Ring would be fundamentally changing the identity of the format. We aren't trying to eliminate all explosive starts. It happening every once in a while is cool, and removing the other 3 cards geometrically reduces the number of hands capable of sustaining above curve mana generation. Nadu was banned because it's been banned everywhere. And usually when it's banned in one format or another and it's a problematic card, Commander has a way of, dealing with it, because it's one of. You can only have 1 copy of non-basics in the deck. But the problem with Nadu wins, it takes a really long time to do non-deterministic sequences that can't be shortcut, because it can't, or might eventually fizzle out, which it does from time to time. These aren't dedicated combo lines that you have to build a deck around. Dropping Nadu in a normal Simic shell still runs the risk of grinding game to a slog of resource accrual. It interacts badly with cards that are staples of casual play, most notably Lightning Greaves, meaning that decks it gets thrown into without abuse intent can still create a situation where the player is monopolizing all the time in the game. This is true. This is what happened in Pro Tour. It's one of the main reasons why Nadu got banned. It wasn't banned because it was banned because it was really powerful, but it was also banned because of the time sink required to have the Nadu deck pop off and that turn that it takes. They have talked about communicating about silver bordered cards in their deck. That project is going well, but it isn't ready for release, so they're still talking about it. And now it's probably going to be delayed even further, because now they have to deal with all this hate and vitriol because 4 cards got banned. We're working with folks at Wizards to provide some new tools to use in pregame conversations to help folks. That pregame conversation is Rule 0. What do I think? Ban list wise, I did not too long ago own 2 copies of Dockside. One I cracked at a modern Commander Masters or Modern Masters event. I think it was a double master, something like that. I cracked this borderless and I kept that, and then about a month and a half ago I traded in the other one because my idea is to get a couple of really pricey cards via trading, and I did, and just kind of proxy them in some of my decks and have a binder with those cards. Shivan, I think, is the one who came up with that idea, if I'm not mistaken, and you just have the proxies in your little proxy binder. You have the base copy in it, and then you just say, hey, I have this proxy, here's like a soul ring, and I hand draw them because they're goofy and whatnot, but and then I'll grab the real card and put it on the field. That was my intent. That's why I traded my Dockside in. But people are so that was me getting lucky in a sense, but people, when it comes to these, and remember, Commander is the most casualist of formats where the stakes have never been lower. Unless you're playing CDH, and that's what these bans were targeting for. These bans were CDH. And the problem that is now happening, I feel, casual Commander doesn't exist anymore in your normal pods, in your normal tables. If I go to a game store and drop down a deck, and say, drop down some of my decks and be like, hey, this is like a 5 or a 6 or a 7. I'm going to have the CEH player win on turn 3. And the competitive Elder Dragon Highlander, competitive Commander player, only knows how to play competitively. They don't know how to play in that. Their decks have 10 tutors. Their decks have the same 5-card win combos where they can just tutor up any of those win conditions, So it was targeting those decks that have been permeating in casual Commander. I have played in numerous pods, okay, at people's houses, at people's in stores against competitive players. It is a different monster. It is a different experience. For the most part, when I play in a store competitively, I don't have fun. Like when I'm stuck with the competitive sweats, if you will, I don't have fun because those games are brutal. Those games are horrific. I'm not joking. There was one store I refused in my area, not the one I go to pre-releases on and draft, but the store before that, where I refuse to walk in the store anymore because the CEDH player base was so toxic and it was so rampant, and you couldn't get into a pod without playing one of them. Hell, they had their own personal fucking table. The back table of the store was meant for those players. And if you were new like I was and accidentally rolled in and said, hey, I got like a precon that I want to try out, they'll go, cool. And they lick their chops and they go, okay, I kill you in turn 3. Or what happened with me, I finally got a creature on the board at turn 5 and I was immediately Armageddoned. Like, come on, man. Like, that was so ratchet. So, it was the only time I ever instant speed conceded. One of the only times I've ever done that, and just kind of went back and found out, oh yeah, I went to the wrong table, but it does happen but when I'm playing at other people's homes and I know that they play these high powered decks, I have fun. I have fun with those because I know what I'm getting into. So I'll bring like the powerhouses. I'll bring the Edgar Markov. I'll bring my Zada. Yes, my Zada I say is an 8, and only because it has the potential of popping off like that. My Zada didn't have Dockside in it either because it didn't. Zada Dockside for me, in the way I built my Zada, doesn't flow with it. It doesn't make sense to have that card in there. And I did already pull my Docksides out of the 4 commander decks that I had him in, proxied up. I had to take it out of a fair amount. But the thing is, those at home games where I'm at somebody's house and playing, some wild shit happens, man. Like Karkashima. That Karkashima deck that I used to play against was fun, but we knew immediately, or the player playing Thrax Mundus, like, you knew, like, all right, we have to deal with this. Like, we have to, like, focus the attention and get the politics going a little bit more in those games so we don't get steamrolled. And eventually, I had fun in those, but like when you're a brand new commander player and your second game ever is with your pre-con that you just built and you sleeved up and you're all excited and you roll in and you get Urza'd to death, the mono blue Urza, you get that. I'm not allowed to cut those decks anymore because I cut it into the turn 2 win. I've done it numerous times. They'll tell me, hey, Dom, do you want to cut? Nope. You don't want me cutting unless you want to win on turn 2. And then they go, yeah, I do. It's like, the pod don't. So it's mainly targeting the fact that there's been a bleed into the casual format, the casual players with the competitive players, because they don't know any better. And they may not even be playing competitively either. They may not even be playing at events, competitive events. They just see what's going on YouTube. For every commander at home and every game nights, there's and for every Jank Lord, there's like channels that just exclusively deal with competitive Elder Dragon, and people are some people's only experience with it. So they sleeve up this deck and they roll in, they sit in the pod, and they're thinking my weak ass CEH deck is probably like a 7, and they're not realizing that they're playing every mana ramp, they're playing every tutor, they're playing a 3-4 card win combo that they tutor into everything off, and the other 3 players are just unaware that they're about to get pub stomped. So those bans are for that. Now, the second part to this on how they say there's conversation, they're working on a tool set. That tool set is rule 0 and nobody pays attention to it. You sit down at a commander game. You're supposed to start that sumbitch off with a conversation. Hey, what are we playing? What are we doing? What power levels we going into? How many tutors you playing? How many mana ramps? What is the basis of the game? Are we trying to win, or are we trying to win on turn 4, or are we trying to win by having fun? Nobody does this for the most part. You get the power level conversation, but you don't get what are we trying to do. There's a reason why I bring so many commander. I own almost 30 commander decks now. B, I bring varying levels of power. I always bring an unmodified precon. I always bring a heavy hitter, whether it's Edgar or Zada, depending on how I feel. And I'll bring some like mid-level stuff, and I gauge accordingly. I sat, like the last time I played in the store, I sat and I explained that, like, hey, what are we all doing? And I saw varying degrees of power, and I'm like, cool. Like, I wanted to try my D&D deck, the Dungeons and Adventures, the Dice Roll in the Dungeons deck. So I was like, is it cool if I do this? These kids, they're probably young adults. I'm old. Had so much fun just looking at my deck and seeing what it was doing, because I was venturing into the dungeons. I was rolling dice. I was doing wacky shit. And they were just, I lost the game, but they were just so enthralled, because I think one had a precon, one had an upgrade, and one had like a list they got. So they were just playing and having fun. And then I roll in with the wacky adventure deck. And they were just like, whoa, wait, I didn't know that could do that. I didn't know this could happen. Cool. I am so glad I had that conversation beforehand. And saw the power levels, because we had a much better experience had I just, brought out Zada or Markov. Heck, even Pirates, because once Pirates gets going, it's pretty bad. My Pirates deck, my Admiral Brass deck is silly, but in a good way. Even my Shrines deck, I'm glad I had that conversation because I was able to focus in on what the group wanted, what the other three players were trying to do, and adjust accordingly. Now, if it's a bunch of new people and they got precons, that's why I bring the unmodified precon. I think I own the two of the Warhammer 40K decks, non-upgraded. The Urza from Brothers War, unupgrade. I made 2 upgrades, but it's like the minimalist of upgrades, just mana fixing. And, I'll rock them out. I mean, I'll even rock out the Rule 0, which I've not played yet, and I want to play one time before I break it apart, if I do. It is my Legolas and Gimli Counter of Kills deck. They are not partners. They should have been. But I made a deck based off of those two. So it's dwarves and elves and all the shenanigans that they can do. And I haven't played it yet. I haven't played it yet at all. And I made it like when Lord of the Rings set came out. And I want to play it one time just to say, hey, this is what I do. This is what this deck does. If you don't want to have that, if you don't want to, because it's breaking the rules of Commander, it is 2 commanders and 98 cards. The commanders don't have partner, but I felt they should have. So if you allow me to try this, I'm not going to win. I don't think I'm going to win because it's not built for that, but there we go. And then also, if you're playing competitive, you have to expect rules and bans. It's just a fact of life. And a lot of these people have never played Standard, have never played Modern, have never played Pioneer. I'm an old mofo who remembers when it was called Type 1, Type 1.5, and Type 2. Standard, Modern, Vintage, Legacy didn't exist. I was playing when Vintage was the new shit. I was around when Ice Age and Fallen Empires were the new sets. I mean, come on, man. Like, you got to expect it. These bans happening. And for those that want the rules committee abolished or, threatened in any way, you do not want Wizards controlling this format. You don't. They'll print the cards. There's a reason why they let the Commander's Rule Committee do what they do. You don't want Wizards doing it because Wizards will refuse to ban cards just so you can buy the fucking packs. All right? They never banned in Standard. They never banned Shira did. They never banned Wandering Emperor. And this was a time when if your opponent played turn 1 Swamp, or you did, you knew Shira was happening. If your opponent played turn 1 Plains, you knew Wandering Emperor was in their hand. You just knew it. And one of their ideologies on when it comes to bans is when a card is all over the format. It's why Smuggler's Copter got banned in Standard, because every deck could play Smuggler's Copter, and you were wrong if you didn't. But when it was such a problem, it's a little better now. But when it was such a problem that sideboards had to be based off of those 2 cards, Wizards didn't ban it. Now, it's been a while since we've seen Commander bans, too. But you got to remember, you don't want Wizards controlling your bans because you'll be like, yeah, they weren't banned. But when stuff like really degenerative breaking cards, let's check out the Commander ban list right now while I pull it up on my phone, because Wizards has a problem, and it's called the money printing machine needs to go burr all the time. And if you ban a card because they basically made a 2-card win con and Commander, and it's a new set, they're not going to ban that for a year. Because they need you to buy the packs. Sorry about that. We're going to... That's the vintage and restricted. Legacy bands. Commander band cards. Okay. The Commander band cards list, the conspiracy cards, because they were only made for conspiracy. The 9 cards that reference playing for ante. Cards whose art text. Okay, yeah, there's a couple cards that have slipped through over the years. All right, this is the Commander band list: Ancestral Recall, Balance, Biorhythm, Black Lotus, Braids, Cabal Minion, Chaos Orb, Coalition Victory, Channel, Dockside Extortionist now. Emrakul the Aeon's Torn. If you let Wizards of the Coast be in control of the ban list, Emrakul is never getting banned. It might actually get unbanned. Golos Tireless Pilgrim, which I don't know why. Hole Breacher would have never been banned. Library of Alexandria, Limited Resources, Mana Crypt now, the Moxes, Nadu, Paradox Engine, Recurring Nightmare, Charizard, Sundering Titan, Time Walk, Time Vault, Tinker, Tolarian Academy, Yawgmoth. A lot of those cards on the Commander ban list that I just said wouldn't be banned if Wizards of the Coast controlled the list. Simply put, they would actually go out of their way to print these cards in sets to get new players to buy them and then never ban them. You're talking about a company that has numerous times printed cards that had to be immediately banned before this, a week into the set coming out, because they didn't realize we had accidentally printed a 2-card combo in Standard. Felidar Guardian died because of the sins of R&D. Felidar Guardian was basically like the bounce spell, but if you had that in Shahili on the field, you won the game. You literally got into an infinite loop of bouncing Felidars and getting Shahilis and, bounce Shahili, bring back to the battlefield, make a copy of Felidar, bounce Shahili, make a copy of Felidar. Once that happened, it was game over because I think these things had haste too. But you're talking about that company, okay? You're talking about a company that thought the way to save Standard was to increase the time of standard rotation from 2 to 3 years. You're talking about a company that didn't realize when they made this announcement that the sets that are coming out like right now, like your Bloom Burrows, which is an amazing set, Duskmourn, which some shit's going down. Your Duskmourn, we didn't account for certain combinations happening. Talking about a company that still refuses to ban Sharded in Standard. So yeah, like you do not want Wizards of the Coast controlling your ban and restricted on the casual format of Commander. If you play competitive, I kind of feel for you, man. I kind of feel for you. Like that, you just lost most of those. 3 of the 4 of those cards are in almost every competitive deck, and we're talking you just lost like $500. So I feel for you on that. But on the other hand, you got to understand, if you want to play the competitive Commander format, which I feel it should be its own separate format, to prevent a lot of these things from happening, because these cards wouldn't get banned if, competitive Commander was its own format, because you're expecting it. You have to take your lumps sometimes, and those lumps hurt. Now, what you don't do is threaten people, first off. You shouldn't go around doing that. I mean, Olivia from Commander at Home, and Commander at Home in general, has been getting a lot of hate on their channel because she is part of the rules committee. And they all have. But these troglodytes, these mouth-breathing asshats, have been saying such insane shit to the rules committee that I'm glad your shit got banned. I really am. If that's your attitude towards things, and remember, and the only reason why I bring up Olivia is because it was just, she was the voice of reason. She was the one who didn't want it. She was the one who, she was in agreement with banning Nadu and Dockside, but not the other two. Not the other two. She wanted to wait. And her reward was, and their reward was getting death threats. So that's not cool at all, considering that this is just a game of cardboard. Your competitive format can still be a competitive format without these cards. You can also still play these cards if you just have that simple rule zero conversation and you know what you're getting into. And also for you competitive players out there, have that conversation too so you know what you're stepping into. Because you may think it's fun that I won on turn 3 against the casuals. But at the end of the day, that's like getting first place in Call of Duty. Did you win anything, son? No, you didn't. You won a game, but there was no life reward involved. Did you have fun doing it? Yeah, you know, I'm having fun with Call of Duty now. I haven't played the franchise since Black Ops 4, and I played Black Ops 6 beta, and it got me right back into it because thank you, Game Pass. But at the end of the day, all I did was just hit buttons better than my opponents sometimes. And I got no life reward for it. Whereas if you sit down and you realize what you're about to get into and tell the pod what you're playing, either they're like me and they'll adjust accordingly, or they may say, hey man, like, hey brah, like, I don't know if you're going to have fun doing this. Because we're going to take 10 minutes to shuffle up. We're going to take all this time to get our first couple turns in, and then you're going to win, and then we're all going to walk away, and you're going to be the only idiot at the table, twiddling his thumbs, waiting for the next 3 people, and then you get a reputation of being that guy, of being that person. And you don't want to be that person. Because that person usually only gets associated with those persons. And eventually, it's just a circle jerk of tier 1, like top tier commander plays, and you're playing like 80 games in like an hour because they end very fast. So yeah, that's just some of my opinions. That's just some of my things. I'm just definitely not the voice of the masses. I'm just the voice of this ass. And on that note, I just want to say, just have fun with your casual format, for fuck's sake. It's a casual format. The stakes have never been lower unless you're playing competitive. And there's a reason why these bans happen, because of the competitive. Maybe, I don't know. There's other ways of going about getting your turn 3 instead of turn 2 commander on the field now. But that affects everybody as well. My name is Dom Douglas, the back-to-back commentator of the year for Xtreme World Wrestling. Catch us on XtremeTVOnline.com, $4.99 a month. The first 5 days are free. And oh boy, the world's on fire. My personal opinion, as I said, I'm okay with the bans. I feel for you if you're hurting on the competitive edge. But you have to expect it in the competitive environment.